There's a lot of noise in the world telling women to bear all emotions, history, pain, dreams. Full disclosure has been dressed up as empowerment, but let's get one thing straight. You don't owe anyone your everything. A woman who shows all her cards too soon gives away the very leverage that life taught her to protect. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your plans, or your scars. Some things are yours, and only yours. That's not being cold, that's being smart, that's self-respect, that's control. We live in a time where oversharing is glorified, where social media turns privacy into currency. But let me tell you something. The most powerful woman in the room is rarely the loudest. She doesn't broadcast her insecurities. She doesn't explain her moves before she makes them. She lets results speak for her. Self-preservation is not deception. It's power. This truth often gets lost in a culture that demands total openness from women. We're told that vulnerability equals authenticity and that keeping anything to ourselves is a form of dishonesty. But let's call that out for what it really is, a dangerous myth. Because when a woman protects certain parts of her life, she's not hiding out of fear, she's preserving her strength. There's a vast difference between deception and discretion, and women are not obligated to be open books just to prove they're trustworthy. You don't hand over your house keys to a stranger. So why would you hand over your story to someone who hasn't earned it? The world is full of people who smile to your face and watch for your weakness. And when you hand them every detail of your fears, your traumas, your aspirations, they will, consciously or not, use those truths to shrink you, to question you, or to box you in. That's not paranoia. That's reality. Self-preservation is about knowing where the boundaries are and enforcing them without apology. It's not about building walls. It's about building gates and knowing when to open them and for whom. There's also something inherently powerful in mystery. When you protect certain truths, you retain control. You decide how much of your emotional and strategic blueprint the world sees. That's not hiding, that's leading. That's thinking 2 steps ahead. Some of the strongest women in history understood this. They spoke with clarity, acted with intention, and revealed only what was necessary. Their silence was not absence, it was calculation. Because when you say less, people lean in more. When you don't lay every card on the table, you force others to play carefully around you. Let's stop confusing emotional exposure with courage. Real courage is knowing what to share and when. It's understanding that just because someone asks doesn't mean you owe them an answer. The power of no, the strength in silence, the ability to say, "That's not something I talk about." Those are not signs of weakness. Those are signs of a woman who knows herself and doesn't need validation to feel whole. You do not need to justify your boundaries. You do not need to explain your silence. You do not need to feel guilty for holding some things sacred. That isn't cold, that isn't deceptive, that's wisdom, that's maturity, that's self-protection in a world that too often exploits a woman's openness. So the next time someone questions your need for privacy, remember this: you're not closing off the world. You're choosing who deserves the right to see you fully. That's not deception. That's power, and that power, it's yours to keep. A woman's silence can be more strategic than her words. We live in a world that celebrates constant noise, commentary, reaction, explanation. The louder you are, the more seen you are. But the truth is, silence is often more powerful than anything that can be said aloud. A woman who knows when to hold back, when to say nothing, when to let others speak while she observes, she holds a position of quiet control that most people never notice until it's too late. There's a misconception that silence equals weakness, that if you're not speaking, you're submitting. But there's a different kind of strength in restraint. Speaking out of emotion, reacting out of impulse, that's easy. Anyone can do that. But choosing to remain silent, especially when provoked, challenged, or underestimated requires discipline, emotional intelligence, and confidence. That's not silence born of fear, that's silence born of power. A woman who stays quiet isn't always holding back because she's unsure. Sometimes she's simply planning, observing, listening, gathering more than anyone else in the room. Because while others rush to speak, to defend, to dominate the conversation, she's learning everything she needs to know about people's intentions, about dynamics, about weaknesses she can exploit if she needs to. Silence doesn't mean absence, it means attention, and in high stakes situations, attention is everything. We've been conditioned to believe that in order to be taken seriously, women must constantly prove their intelligence, their value, their readiness. But what if true strength is in not needing to prove anything at all? What if the most powerful move in a room full of noise is to sit back, smile, and say nothing, knowing that your presence alone speaks volumes? Strategic silence also protects peace. Not every battle deserves a response. Not every insult needs to be addressed. Not every lie must be corrected. Sometimes, the loudest statement a woman can make is her refusal to engage. That's not avoidance, it's control. When you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to people who misunderstand you on purpose, you've reached a place of true power. You stop wasting energy trying to convince and instead redirect that energy toward building, creating, and advancing. People reveal themselves when you stay quiet. They fill the space. They expose their assumptions, their weaknesses, their insecurities. And that's when the tables turn. Because the woman who watches, who waits, who doesn't flinch under pressure, she becomes the one no one can predict, no one can control. That unpredictability makes her dangerous in the best way. So if you've ever been told you need to speak up to be powerful, think again. There's a time to roar, and there's a time to stay still. A woman who knows the difference is not only strong, she's unstoppable, because her silence, it's not emptiness, it's intention, and intention always wins. True strength lies in selective vulnerability. The world has twisted the concept of strength into something hollow, loud voices, unshakable exteriors, endless endurance without pause. But real strength, the kind that builds resilience and power over time, doesn't come from denying emotion. It comes from choosing how, when, and with whom to reveal it. Vulnerability is not a weakness, but offering it to everyone. That is, selective vulnerability is not about shutting the world out. It's about being intentional. It means you don't pour your heart out to anyone who asks just because they seem kind. It means you don't share your pain with people who haven't earned the right to hear it. There's courage in being open, yes, but there's wisdom in knowing the difference between openness and exposure. One builds connection. The other can destroy trust, confidence, and peace if given to the wrong people. Too many women have been conditioned to wear their hearts on their sleeves just to prove they're real, relatable, or authentic. But you don't need to bleed publicly to be human. You don't need to unravel in front of the world to show you feel. The truth is, when you offer your deepest emotions to anyone and everyone, you invite in opinions, projections, and even judgment that can twist your experience into something it was never meant to be. That's not healing, that's self-sabotage dressed up as honesty. There's also something sacred about holding pieces of yourself close. The world doesn't need access to every chapter of your story to understand your value. You can be deeply emotional, deeply human, and still choose privacy. In fact, that choice is a form of self-respect. It says, I own my story, I choose how it's shared, I control the narrative, and that control, that calm, quiet confidence, is what true strength looks like. We all need people, but we don't need all people. Selective vulnerability means you know who's safe and who's not. You know who can hold your truth with care, and who will use it to feel better about themselves. You understand that not every moment of pain needs to be turned into a public performance. Some things are meant to be worked through quietly, privately, or with just one trusted voice beside you. Strength isn't the absence of tears, it's knowing where to cry. It's not the absence of doubt, it's knowing who can help you carry it. It's not about pretending you're fine, it's about knowing when to be honest and with whom. That kind of strength isn't flashy. It won't get you instant applause, but it will protect your spirit, your boundaries, and your sense of self in a world that constantly demands too much from women. Selective vulnerability is a quiet revolution. It tells the world, you may see parts of me, but only the parts I choose to show. The rest, that's mine, and that's my power. Mystery isn't weakness, it's a weapon. In a time where everyone is expected to broadcast their every move, thought, and emotion, there's something quietly rebellious about a woman who keeps things to herself. A woman who doesn't explain every decision, who doesn't seek permission or validation, who doesn't overshare. She becomes impossible to predict, and that unpredictability is a kind of power that makes people uncomfortable in all the right ways. We've been sold this idea that openness equals strength, that if we're not constantly sharing, updating, confessing, then we're somehow hiding or even lying, but that's a shallow version of empowerment. Real power doesn't always announce itself. Real power moves in silence, and a woman who knows how to move that way, carefully, strategically, and without explanation, is someone who knows exactly where her strength lies. Mystery creates space. It creates room for interpretation, for curiosity, for presence. When you're not constantly explaining yourself, people don't know how to define you. And more importantly, they don't know how to control you. They're forced to respect the boundaries you've set, even if they don't understand them. And in that confusion, they're left guessing, that's where your advantage is. When people can't figure you out, they can't box you in. They can't undermine your plans because they don't even know what your plans are. A mysterious woman makes people lean in, not because she's manipulative, not because she's withholding out of fear, but because she's mastered the art of intentional presence. She doesn't have to explain herself to be understood. She doesn't have to reveal everything to be respected. She knows that privacy isn't shame, it's strategy, that boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They separate the curious from the committed, the observers from the insiders. There's something magnetic about a woman who moves this way. She's not cold, but she's controlled. She's not aloof, but she's precise. Every word she chooses is on purpose. Every silence is chosen. Every glimpse into her world is earned, not handed out freely. That's not about being secretive for the sake of ego. It's about self-respect. It's about guarding your peace in a world that profits off of women who overshare, overextend, and overexplain. Mystery allows you to protect your essence while still showing up fully. You can be seen without being dissected. You can lead without being predictable. You can connect without surrendering your entire self. And when you learn how to hold onto that mystery, not as a shield, but as a tool, you'll find that people respect you differently. They may not always understand you, but they'll know better than to underestimate you. So don't fall for the pressure to reveal everything just to make others comfortable. Keep your mystery, keep your boundaries. Let the world wonder, and in that wondering, let your power grow, because mystery doesn't make you less. It makes you unstoppable. A woman's power isn't defined by how much she reveals. It's defined by how wisely she chooses what to withhold. In a world that constantly demands her openness, her explanations, and her emotional labor, her greatest strength often lies in what she keeps to herself. Self-preservation is not a flaw. It's a form of self-respect. Silence isn't submission, it's strategy. Vulnerability, when offered with intention, becomes a tool of connection rather than a weapon used against her. And mystery, far from being a sign of weakness, is often the sharpest edge she can carry. So let them wonder, let them question, let them talk. A woman who protects her thoughts, guards her emotions, and hides her next move is not playing small. She's playing smart, and in doing so, she doesn't just survive, she leads. She builds, she conquers, quietly, intentionally, and without apology.